We here at Pitch support and stand in solidarity with the members of the WGA and everyone supporting their current fight for fair compensation and their rightful place in the future of film, television, and streaming content production. Head over to WGA.org to find out more and how you can support as well.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Pitch. I'm Leah St. Marie.
And I'm Angel.
And today we have a special guest with us, Bill Thompson, who is the Executive Director of Young Storytellers, an arts education nonprofit based here in LA. Welcome, Bill.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Of course, happy to be here.
So I've volunteered with Young Storytellers for many years. I did the biggest show, which I think is when we physically met in 2018 at the Ace Hotel. I was asking you about parking passes. And you were kind enough to direct me to where to get my parking validated. But why don't you tell us a little bit about Young Storytellers, because it's something I'm passionate about, and it's a nonprofit that part of our premium podcast proceeds go towards.
Yeah, I mean, I think the heart of Young Storytellers, as you know, is about creating a space for young people to be the driving force of their own narratives. Really giving them an opportunity to see the impact that their thoughts, feelings, and words can have on the world around them. We work in public schools who have been historically marginalized and oppressed. Here in Los Angeles, volunteer mentors go into the schools and they work directly with young people who then write their own original stories that are performed by professional actors at a sort of community school celebration. And we work with elementary school students, middle school students, and high school students here in Los Angeles. And we've just been very fortunate, especially as we emerge from COVID, to have a dedicated base of volunteers who come in and work with the students and help them craft their stories, and then the actors perform them. So
yeah, it was interesting during COVID to continue the work, and the kids would show up on Zooms.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting for us because we developed a whole new program model during COVID. So, historically our elementary school program is 1-to-1. So each fifth grade student is working with their own mentor to write their story. But we had complications with Zoom where we weren't able to have breakout rooms with one adult and one student. So we ended up building this collaborative stories model, which is a little bit more like a writer's room. So there are a couple of students and a couple of volunteers that are writing a collaborative story. And we're able to sort of keep the artistic primacy for the students by giving them a character that they're the voice of. So even though it's a collaborative process, they each have ownership over a character's voice throughout the story. And I think it was designed because we were trying to come up with a fix, like a logistical fix for COVID. But the unintended consequence is that the kids were so isolated during COVID, and they had such little opportunity to connect with each other.
Yeah.
Because they were, by themselves, and they were looking at 30 boxes on a screen when they were getting whatever instruction they were getting. And the teachers and the parents were saying how important it was for them to be in a breakout room just with a couple of kids to be able to do something that was fun and creative and inspiring. And so we've kept that program model. We're still doing the collaborative program model because even coming out of COVID, years of isolation for these kids, there's that need for not just the adult to young person connection, but the connection from young person to young person that isn't digital. Yeah. That's not through a screen, that's not through social media, but that's actually being present with one another, which, is more important now than ever.
Yeah.
What a great unintended side effect of a technical problem that had like an organic, benefit.
That's right.
That's really great.
Did it allow the program to grow? Because I know you're based in LA, but you have like pockets of of this program across the United States, right?
We do. So we have a program in a program in New York City, a program in Little Rock, Arkansas, and a program in Denver, Colorado, right now. And we've historically had programs in San Francisco and Austin, Texas, although those have not come back after COVID. I think, we're now, one of the things that we learned during COVID, and as we emerge from COVID, is that the world has changed in very profound ways.
Yeah.
And the way in which we work, the way in which we value time, the way in which we spend time outside of our homes is different. Mm-hmm. And our volunteer community went from 12 to 1,300 people before COVID to the first year back in person after COVID, 300-400 people. And we're up now to a little north of 500 people, I think, this school year, but it's still
less than half of what you had before
what it
COVID,
used to be.
Oh, man.
And I think that volunteers were always, for our organization, it was it started as a grassroots organization. It was volunteer led for 6 years before it was even a nonprofit. And volunteers have always been the driver of growth and impact for the organization. And we just finished a strategic plan last year. And I think we just realized that, the world will never go back to the way that it was in 2019, and things will incrementally improve and get easier. Mm-hmm. But there have been just tectonic shifts that I think will, continue to reverberate, and especially with workplace volunteering, which is a huge part of our volunteer base. So our new strategy is actually to take our programs and to create toolkits for those programs. And we're going to partner with community-based organizations or PTAs at local schools to be able to teach other people how to do what we've done as like a direct service organization for 25 years, so that we can scale regionally and nationally, keeping that same sort of grassroots ethos that started the program initially. We just now have 25 years of experience and data.
Wonderful.
To be able to provide, a curriculum that we know is, incredibly impactful with the outcomes that we want.
Because it's something where all it takes is somebody who is passionate enough about young storytellers that has a little bit of time. Like, you could start one up. I could start one up in Ohio. I could be like, hey, Mom, let's do this at the grade school.
That's right. Absolutely.
That's all that it takes. And then you gather other people who are like-minded. And what's so interesting, if I can go a little bit on why I'm so passionate about this, I was applying to PhD programs, and part of my work for this was how poetry grows empathy in the brain. So empathy is so important to the human race that if you suffer any frontal lobe trauma where empathy is located, right, the brain will shift where the empathy is located just so you have it still. Wow. And they were doing these studies with fMRIs in England, and they were exposing patients to music, and they were exposing patients to Shakespeare. And what's interesting, when you hear or are engaged in poetry, your brain has to do a functional shift to understand what the words are. And that functional shift is in the same spot of the brain where empathy is. And so the work that you're doing actually grows empathy in these young minds. And what's so cool about that is empathy helps with recidivism rates. So you have like some arts programs are directly correlated to lower crime.
Sure. And I would even argue that, the empathy building is as present for the volunteers, for the adults, as it is for the for the young people. I mean, that was my personal sort of experience in the program. I started as a volunteer.
Yeah.
Right?
How did you and when did you get started?
17 years ago.
Okay.
I'm here. It's I feel in many ways that it's like I'm an accidental executive director, right? This wasn't the path that I had chosen for myself, and I moved out here to get into film and television, and I was at my first job, and my boss came in and said, "I need to send you down to an elementary school at lunch today to work on a program." I was like, "What?" And And he's like, well, I started a nonprofit when I was in grad school, and the woman who runs it, they need volunteers. I told her I'd send somebody. You're the newest person in the office. It's your turn. And I was like, what am I doing? And he's like, enough. Like, no questions. Just go. You'll figure it out. And for me personally, like, I'm not a kid person. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have children now, so but
You've become a little bit of a kid person.
I've become more of a kid person, but I'm an only child.
Okay.
Right? Like, I'm not someone who, I don't think I'd been in a room with a 10-year-old since I was 10. Right.
Wow.
And I go to this elementary school, and I was paired with a girl who on the surface was the exact opposite of me. She was incredibly shy, Latina, struggling to learn English. And I think the only thing in the moment we met each other that we had in common is that we were both just terrified of one another. But we sort of we just took that leap of faith, and, I kept showing up.
Yeah.
And she started to open up and wrote a story about a girl whose family is about to be evicted from their home. Mm. But she has an imaginary friend who is a magical flying unicorn. And he lets her sell rides on him at the school to all of her friends. And it raises enough money so that her family can stay in their home. And we're at the big show, which is where the actors show up and they audition for the kids, and the kids cast the actors in the parts. And this girl, I could barely get a yes or no answer out of the first 3-4 weeks of the program. All of a sudden, I see her strutting down this red carpet. She's got this VIP badge on. She's on stage, casting the actors, knows exactly who she wants in the parts. Her mom is sitting in the audience, in tears. And I just had this epiphany of oh, this is the story that is being told here in LA that matters. Right? I was working on a TV show at the time that was prestigious and would go on to do all of these, all these people would watch it. But this girl's story just felt so much more important. And to go to the empathy thing, I felt seen in her story, because this girl, when I was growing up, I had a fair amount of economic insecurity in my life. My dad lost his job a ton when I was little, so we were always moving back to my grandparents' farm. And I would, at 6, 7, 8 years old, would fall asleep, hearing my parents argue about money, or I would feel guilty because my feet would grow and I'd need a new pair of shoes. Mm-hmm. This girl knows none of that about me. But she writes this story that's authentic to her, that's from her lived experience. And I'm all over that. And this connection, the connective tissue of her story, the empathy that's built there, the fact that I could be seen in her story was so profound and so moving to me.
That's one of those things too, when Taha, my first mentee, got into the big show, at the same time in my life, I had sold the thing to Shudder. And I was very excited about that. But when I heard the news that his play, because they choose 5 students from the
hundreds,
year,
yeah.
When I heard the news that his story got picked to be, is it the big show, the biggest show?
The biggest show.
The biggest show. I was up here instead of my Shudder thing. I was no, Taha's thing was way more important. Yeah.
And you did so much legwork, because I remember we had a really hard time.
Oh, yeah.
I think he had moved schools, and of course this happens all the time with the school district, but the school that he was at didn't have the correct contact information. Yeah. And I mean, it was to the point where I was sweating it. His story was brilliant. I was at was it Palms?
It was Palms.
Elementary school. That's right. Brian Lynch was the head mentor. I was there at the performance at the school, and I saw the story, and I was this is one of the funniest things
hilarious
I've ever seen. It was the descendants of Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel? Or no, James Corden.
Yeah.
It was Jimmy Fallon and James Corden.
Fashion off.
And they had a fashion off in Dubai.
Yes.
And it was just so imaginative and so creative and so informed by pop culture, and it was so funny, and
good memory.
It was just fabulous. And I was really stressed that we weren't going to be able to have him and his family
Me
at
too.
the event. And I don't even remember how you did it, but you like pulled a rabbit out of a hat, and all of a sudden it was like we were connected with his family and he could be there.
Background in investigative journalism.
That's right.
That's what it was.
It was
finally
amazing.
paid off.
Finally, my master's degree paid off.
But in a huge way, it sounds like.
In a huge way.
Yeah.
It was important for me for him to get the recognition that he deserved for his stuff.
Well, he was one of those special kids. I don't know if you saw the sizzle reel from the event, but the end of it is just a shot of him standing outside of the Ace Hotel looking up at the marquee.
Yes.
And everything on his face, and this kid isn't an actor,
No.
but like he's just there and present in this moment, and it's just all of the impact of what we do was like on this young man's face. It was such a gorgeous moment to capture, and like not a staged moment and not on stage, and there was no audience. But you just get this glimpse of the future he could see for himself.
Yeah.
And the belief that he had in himself after having this experience, that he had tapped into the thing that makes him so special, that every 1,000 people were responding to, which is like his voice. And that's a really powerful thing.
Would you say there's anything as powerful as that outside of the realm of working with children's storytellers? Because once you get into adult Hollywood writing, storytelling, whatever, television or movies, it's a different business, and it's a different sort of like magic. And you were talking about, Leah, your joy at selling a script to Shudder and then seeing how much it meant to this child to have their play picked, and the discrepancy there. Like, do you ever see that much magic with adults, or is there something about seeing children?
That's a great question.
Well,
That just makes it much more magical.
we were all children.
Yeah.
Right. So we were all 10 and 11 and untouched by self-critique and self-censorship and negative self-talk. And so I think that magic happens. And when I see art, be it film or theater, or like it's when the voice is so strong and the voice is so pure, the story has to be told by that person in this moment. And that authenticity comes from, I think they are tapped into that same space that our young writers are tapping into, which is the core of who we are. This child, I think so much of like, and I've got a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old now, and I can see the difference already in my 12-year-old. His view of the world is through a harder lens. It's my 8-year-old still sees the world through soft eyes, and that space, I think, is the space of creativity. But I don't think it's a space that adults can't access. I think it is the space that we must strive to access, and from which great art can be created.
I think we can go to go even deeper, and maybe empathy is part of this, but to the room, why is storytelling important?
I mean, I think just on a fundamental level, it was essential as a species for our survival, right? I mean, it started around the campfire. It started around our friend who used to sit around the campfire walked in that bush, and there was a tiger in the bush, and now he's no longer here. So let's tell that story so we don't go to the bush. Yeah. So I think so much of the storytelling was about survival. Like that is like embedded so deeply in our DNA of like who we are as a species. Yeah. But then I think as we have continued to advance and evolve as a species, it really is about, I go back to that experience that I had of like the ability to see myself in someone else's story, or to imagine myself in their shoes, in their story. What would that be like? How would I feel in those given circumstances? What in my life is similar? What story or experience that I have that is similar? Because I think we all strive, and this is also in our DNA, for connection and to belong. I think all the core values of young storytellers are human values at their core.
Yeah.
So that's it for me.
I think it might be the language of connection, right? We have more data than we've ever had in the history of humanity. We're collecting data on all the platforms and all the digital devices, right? But ever since, you took math or whatever the technical class was in grade school, and it was like a lot of us didn't like it, or it didn't resonate with us. Stories resonate with more people than they don't. There's something innate about like learning through storytelling or communicating through storytelling that it's like that is the language of like rapid understanding, rapid connection, rapid insight versus like the analyzation of data points, right?
Totally. You don't remember a number. You remember the story that like illustrates the number. You can't remember, 94% of this, but you tell a story, and the story is sticky.
Yeah.
But I think it's because our brains, that's how we've learned through time.
And then so you have the people who are extraordinary with numbers, and they stand out as a result of that, because I don't know what the statistics are, but I think the majority of people don't operate with numbers sticking or being able to process large numbers or large amounts of data. Like, and those people are impressive and they're cool, and it's like, whoa, they can do math in their head. They can do all these like things that the rest of us have to struggle to do with data points, right? Where the rest of us, we get by and we commune and connect through storytelling, and we survive and we learn, and we grow and we evolve. So I think it's probably, like you said, in our DNA. It's an innate. It's like the universal operating language almost.
It's so cool that we're using the word survival. I remember reading Guns, Germs, and Steel, and he's talking about in Papua New Guinea how two tribesmen would come across each other's paths, and they would have to talk about their relations until they found a relation that was a connection. Otherwise, they would kill each other.
Oh.
So we're going from a place of pure survival for storytelling into, I think nowadays, emotional survival. Like I went to Ireland with my brother, and it was during the James Joyce week that they do over there. And in tandem with that, there was kind of like a storytelling tour where you could go around to different people's houses, go into their house, have dinner with them, as long as you told a story. Like that was the trade that you were offering. So I think that there's this evolution of, this is the reason that we used to tell stories, so that we wouldn't die. And now we're telling stories so that, I don't know, I know it sounds cheesy, but so that our hearts are full in some way, right?
Yeah.
Well, our existential questions have not changed.
Yeah.
Right? So everything we have surrounded ourselves, I think of Waiting for Godot all the time, because we've surrounded ourselves with more and more tools and distractions and technology and everything else. But the thing that makes us human, the inevitable end that we all must face and come to terms with, and, those questions and our purpose here, and those big existential questions, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know that math can answer those big existential questions.
I would say mathematicians might argue that that they're working toward it.
We'll have a mathematician on next.
As the counterpoint.
MIT.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think that the stories are the way to help answer those questions, and to structure it as a narrative is a way for us to be able to even understand our own lives. I mean, I think so much, when I think about the impact Young Storytellers has had on me, I have the benefit of like narrative hindsight, which is I've been able to live 17 years, and then I can look back at the breadcrumbs and see the story, while often when we're in the moment, we don't understand the significance yet.
100%.
So that also, I think, storytelling is essential to how we understand our lives and our purpose and why we're sitting here today. What are the things that happened and the moments that happened that made this moment possible? I think all of that is essential for our understanding of the world.
Okay,
so to pivot a little bit,
I got one more thing about that.
Okay, great, go.
So Joseph Campbell was asked a question. This is the
Yeah.
world famous, myth. He studied all the myths around the world and recognized the similarities between them. And someone asked him, "Where do you fall on your belief in the afterlife and God?" And I'm going to butcher his reply, but it was something to the effect of, "I know the myths, so I'm comforted by the stories. I don't need faith in a religion. I don't think any one of them is my path. I think understanding all of them has given me the comfort that other people seek in an individual myth, like the Jesus myth or, whatever religion people follow." And I was like, oh, that's really fascinating. He found comfort. He found faith. He found his ease in life about these unanswered questions you're talking about through all of the stories and all of the myths that all of the great religions and cultures throughout all of his research, most of mankind have come to. And he's seen all the similarities. And he goes, well, if they all came to the same basic story, then that comforts me. Because there's something innate in us that needs that story.
That's right.
And that's enough for me because I know all the stories.
And it all goes to the connection point, because then that connects us with every other human being who has struggled with attempting to answer these unanswerable questions.
Yeah.
And that's how we are all the same.
Yeah, to be seen. Yeah. All right, because this is pitch, and since we're talking about stories, what is the Social Venture Partners Fast Pitch?
So that was a program that I went through, I don't remember how long ago, but 7, 8 years ago, maybe, that helps executive directors or development directors who are fundraisers for nonprofits develop a pitch for funders. Or, sometimes they talk, it's like an elevator pitch, or like, you're in, you walk into the elevator and Bill Gates is there, and thankfully he's going to the top floor. So what is, and you're alone. And no one gets on the elevator between the first floor and the top floor. The conditions are perfect. How do you, in 3 minutes or less, make the case for your organization and the impact that your organization has?
So what are some things that you learned in that you would apply to Hollywood pitching or pitching stories?
I'm a firm believer that every pitch should be personal. I think you're a person pitching to a person, first and foremost. So you're people first. So I also think that you don't just go into the pitch, learn the person. Build the relationship with the person. Be in the space with the person. Yes, you have work to do, and you're there. Each person has an agenda, but you're also just two human beings sharing a space. So my number one thing that I think I've learned is just to invest in the person first. And then you'll hear things, you'll learn things about their interests, their values. People are actually surprisingly transparent about what they care about, what they're interested in when you connect with them personally. And then I think that information can actually help you when you're doing the pitch. You'll understand your audience and their motivation a little more. I also think research is really important.
Oh, yeah.
So I think knowing who you're speaking to, I think about as a nonprofit executive, I'm always thinking like, all right, we're going to this foundation or this corporation. What are their funding priorities? What are their values? What are things I'm going to say that are true about young storytellers that will meet those needs? How am I an answer to the question that they're attempting to solve, the impact they want to have? I think so much of it is also recontextualizing the relationship. You're coming in to be, they want you to be the answer to their problem.
That's true.
Yeah.
So there's often this thing of like, it's coming from like a scarcity mindset of like, oh, well, if all, I hope I have something to offer. Well, no, if you walk in and it's like, no, be confident that I'm who you've been looking for.
Yeah.
This story is what you've been looking for. I know what your goals are, and this is the thing. And to sort of build that connective tissue. And then I would also say the big thing I learned from Fast Pitch was that, and I'm not quite sure what the correlative is with pitching, although I do think there is one with creating, which is that it needs to come authentically from you. Like for the nonprofit world, like it can't be about jargon. It has to, our pitch has to be about who we are and what we believe and what we care about. It has to be true and real. And I think it's the same thing if you're a writer. Like you can't try to game the market. I call it chasing dollars in the nonprofit world. Like I'm not going to go pitch a healthcare funder for what we do. Right. Like I'm not going to try to make what we do sound like something that's appealing to the healthcare partner. I'm going to find the place that is the right fit, and I'm going to tell the true, authentic story of who we are, and it will work or it won't work. It'll be a fit or it won't be a fit. But I'm not going to change us or who we are or what we do for it to be a fit. And I think it's the same thing with the creative. Like, I'm not going to, because this movie did well at the box office or this TV show's a hit, I'm not going to try to write that or do that. What is the story that's inside you that you have to tell, that you're the only person who can tell, because you've lived the life that you've lived and you have this perspective and this point of view. It must be told. To me, that's the place that we should be creating and pitching from.
I think there's this pie chart of what goes into a pitch, right? And it could, like, the percentages vary depending on who you're pitching to, and part of it is confidence, and part of it is research, and part of it is what the story is. And it's so interesting to me that you can take a business model pitching elements and apply it to something creative, because all of those translate, right?
Completely.
So how do you pitch? What elements go into young storytellers? You have the verbal pitch. Do you bring in any video? Do you bring them to like an elementary school?
All of the above, and depending on the audience. So I think that it's I've got a toolbox filled with tools, but I'm only going to use the tools that make sense with this particular person, the ones that'll resonate with this particular person. So, and a lot of that, again, comes from listening and actually building a real relationship. I mean, I joke with my wife all the time that like I feel like I have no friends as a human being. All of my friendships are in service of young storytellers. I invest as a person in the relationships that lead to an outcome for this organization that I care so deeply about. And so I think it comes with just, you can do some pre-research, but I also think you can learn a lot by just asking questions. And so that I think works for me.
Something you said in there struck me, and I want to, before we get too far away from it, why, what's the story inside of you, right? Why are you the only person to tell the story? I think this is why you are the executive director of this organization. What you shared earlier about your first experience, that your boss made you go to this organization and sit across from this young girl who was basically like as terrified as you were. And then out of that, you had this, what sounded like a pretty life-changing experience, watching her come to life and tell this story and finding similarities to your own life in it. So you are almost the embodiment of what you're talking about with how you pitch. You're like, why me? Why am I the person? Like, why are you the shepherd of this organization? Because you've been doing it since 2006 now. So
yeah, I think that's right. But there was if I look back, this is the narrative hindsight thing. If I look back, there's like another story before that, which was the story of like, my parents get divorced halfway through my freshman year of high school. I had experienced no art as a human being.
Oh, wow.
I had never been to an art museum. I'd never seen a dance concert. I'd never seen a play. Like it was just not part of my upbringing. And I ended up, when my parents got divorced, my mom and I moved to Delaware in January of my freshman year of high school. Into her cousin's house, because my mom was putting herself through college. My mom wasn't a college graduate until my parents got divorced. So she was putting herself through college while I was in high school. And we didn't have enough money to live on our own. We moved in my cousin's house, or my mom's cousin's house. And I'm in a completely different environment than I've ever been in before. And I go to my guidance counselor. And at the time, I was like a young Republican. I was into like political science. I had like a letter from Ronald Reagan. Like I was just not at all who I am today.
Wow.
And the guidance I was trying to get into a political science or an economics class. And the guidance counselor was like, sorry, those are only for juniors or seniors. And she was like, the only thing that's open is study hall, or a theater class. She's like, there's a theater elective. She's like, just take the theater class. It's an easy A. And I was like, all right. I go into this theater class. Again, never seen a play before, don't know what's going on. And the first assignment when I walk in was they were working on Vietnam era monologues. And there was like a pile of scripts, and the teacher's like, grab one. So I pull out this play called Streamers by David Rabe. I find a monologue and I do it, and I just read it. I don't know. And afterwards, he's like, will you stick around after class? I was like, yeah, sure. And I go after class, and he's like, oh, you're new here, right? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Have you ever done this before? And I was like, no, it's the first time I've like ever really, I'm an only child, so I talk to myself a lot outside, but I've never really like read anything like this, and he was like, well, do you want to come audition for the school play? And I was like, I was terrified because I didn't know what that meant, but I was like, I'll do anything to get out of like my mom's cousin's house. I need somewhere to go. Like I have no friends, like, yes. And so I auditioned for the play, and I get cast in Richard III.
Wow.
And then I do like this play Medea. And like so happens that this public school teacher has independently been like writing grants and stuff at night. And he's built this really amazing theater department within this high school. And like through my working in that theater department, like the Mendelssohn String Quartet comes and performs. The David Parsons Dance Company comes. The Folger Shakespeare Company comes and does stage combat with us. And all of a sudden, like my life, like my brain, my soul, like just explodes open because I've never been exposed to any of this before, like the possibility of any of this. And I can literally draw everything in my life that's had any meaning. My kids, my wife, young storytellers, anything that's brought me joy, I can go back to that moment when an adult saw something in me that I had no idea existed for myself. And the power of that, to me, is also something that exists within young storytellers, right? That relationship that we go in and we believe this young person has something inside of them that they don't know is there yet, and it's gonna be magic. That's powerful shit. And that's so again, like, so but this again, I benefit from the hindsight of living the life. I'm 46. I can now look back and understand the touchstones in my life that brought me here. And so I pitch that, and I pitch my relationship to the thing, because again, the first thing I said about this is people pitch to people give to people. And I think I'm the best way to move somebody, unless I'm taking them to a school, right? And sometimes I think I have to be careful with that. I think the nonprofit sector has to be careful about not tokenizing our young people, about not putting them on display, about not using them as case studies. Mm-hmm. So I really do often defer to myself in the pitches. I try not to tell someone else's story. I try to tell my story and why it's impactful, to avoid those things.
What's great about what you just did, and I hope the listeners were paying attention, is Angel and I were both very captivated. You started with a personal story of yours, how you transitioned as a character from this person who had a Ronald Reagan letter into somebody who is full-blown into theater and arts, and how that then translated into where you are now. Like the steps of that, I was completely engaged. Like if you're pitching me young storytellers, I'm in right now.
Yeah.
Because
that's just your personal story. That's just, it's your journey along the path and how you changed. I had a friend ask me yesterday, what are all the screenwriting books that you've read? What do they all say? What do they all have in common? I'm like, stories, this story, that story's about change. Mm-hmm. And she goes, yeah, but sometimes story's not about change. And I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. But change is like an element, whether it's going to happen or not, mm-hmm. right? But in the majority of stories that I consume, change is a huge element. And then your personal story had several pivotal moments of change in there.
Well, I feel that way. I mean, both stories, if I'm gonna intellectualize them, are about transformation.
Yeah.
And that is also what I think an outcome of Young Storytellers is for the young people we serve, and also for the volunteers that participate. So that's the connective tissue for me, are what has happened in my life that has led to transformation, and how can I tell that story in a way that lands with the transformation that a young person experiences when they've gone through our program.
Yeah.
And that's so true. Like all of the kids that I've had the pleasure of mentoring have started out kind of shy.
Yeah.
And then they become themselves after the second or third week.
It's a powerful gift to
Yeah.
give a young person. It's really, because we're not, the dirty secret is the mentors aren't doing anything, right? We just create space. We're creating space and we're supporting and we're cheerleaders and we're genuinely there to build this young person up. But all the magic and beauty and genius is within them. We're not there teaching them. If anything, like we learn more from them than they probably learned from us. But it really is about just creating space. And I think 2023, what's more important than space, than presence, than focus, than someone saying like, this space is for you. I'm here just to support what you need in this space. Like we've gone through this incredibly traumatic upending of our world.
Yeah.
Something that was unimaginable literally happened to everyone collectively. Some people suffered more than others, but everyone collectively had the experience of a core tenet of our existence, that we can just leave our house every day and have autonomy and do this, was threatened by a virus, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a movie. But we lived it. And now as we come out of it, I mean, I think that there's a mental health crisis. There is especially a youth mental health crisis. But so much of that is that we need to go back to those elemental things of creating space where we feel as if we belong. We have empathy for one another. We feel connected. We don't feel alone. We don't feel isolated. That's the salve for the years of isolation that we felt.
Yeah. I kind of wish that there was more mentor-mentee relationships, like for me,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, like why stop with just children?
Why
Like
stop-
children clearly are the ones who probably stand to benefit the most, but when it stops there and then you're an adult, but you still would like some guidance.
Yeah. Maybe I need to climb a mountain in Nepal or something and go find a mentor.
For what? For sitting on a mountain though?
For sitting on a, yeah, for peace, for
peace,
clarity.
yeah.
Peace and clarity.
Yeah.
I feel like sitting on a mountain
I'll
just
find a
engenders
goat.
that in a person
would.
anyway. Yeah, you don't need a mentor once you're up there.
Yeah,
Maybe-
it's getting there is the thing.
Yeah.
What's interesting, what that makes me think of, though, is like maybe the way to feed that need for yourself is to find someone to mentor,
Yeah.
to turn it the other way, because I think you can find the same things. I think about that often, like, even if I haven't had necessarily like concrete mentor relationships in my life, I can point to people who have, given me that hand up, had the meeting with me to explain how something works, the people that went before
Yes.
us. And so I find now now that I'm 46 and I feel old and irrelevant, that I temper that by talking often to younger people that I encounter, interns, alumni with the program,
Yeah.
The folks that come in right out of college and work for Young Storytellers, being able to provide that same, roadmap of like what could be possible for them, from the perspective of, the 20 years of, I remember we were all, in our 20s at some point, and what that means. I don't know. I've gotten a lot out of that.
Yeah. And you're pretty good, Leah, about mentoring and giving back and constantly reaching out to people to help them. That's like something you have actively done for years, both on Twitter contests,
Oh, yeah.
with
And
young,
Young
storytellers,
Storytellers. The Pay Up Hollywood
specifically,
thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you have a robust history of it.
I hope that's what this podcast is doing. Like giving people who don't necessarily know where the door is or how to open the door into Hollywood, quote unquote.
Yeah.
This is part of that mentor system.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're finding people to help along the path, that is rewarding. But then also there are answers that you would still need, like we still need answers, right? So
Right.
we're building a community and we're building a platform to engage with people like yourself, Bill,
Yeah.
and get some insight, even though we don't have like acute, like I sit down with this person every week and they give me advice and feedback, it's like you find ways to get the information and the guidance that you need, whether it's by helping other people or by building a community or by like, making friends who have like similar interests but have different experiences.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the question is, how do you make the world better? But that's too broad of a thing. Like, I don't know if I have enough power to make the world better. Like, what percentage of the world do I need to make better? But if you take it into a more granular, like Ken Burns style, the way that you do that is you make the world around you better.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's all we can control, or our relationships, our friendships, are with everyone that we encounter. I mean, what else could you actually do? I think this is what's been so difficult about, a time where we're questioning every system, right? All of the systemic issues that exist, and then the powerlessness that when you are complicit in those systems, you're a part of those systems. What's left if you completely dismantle those systems? Those are really hard, exhausting questions to answer. And I have found comfort in, we talk about this a lot at Young Storytellers, like we can't fix everything out there, but we can do it right here. Yeah. Our culture can be the culture we want. We can actually live our values. We can do what we say we're doing here.
Yeah.
And know that may not be true in other places in the world, but we can control what we can control.
Yeah.
It's also one of those things where I don't like it when somebody is like, yeah, I'll keep my ears open, because that's such a passive thing to do. But it takes a very special person who is in the know to, instead of say, I will keep my ears open, to I will actively ask someone. But not a lot of people have that tool in their toolbox.
Yeah.
I think some advice to any writers listening to this would be, you're seeking how somebody else can help you. And we're talking about how you can be a mentor to someone else. Well, how can you help somebody else? Like, we're not a big deal, Angel and I. We have a podcast, though. You can have a podcast. You have friends who want to make a film. Go make a film. Like, there is power in you that is untapped that you do not realize.
Well, it goes back to also what you said about solving their problem, right? That's if you're pitching someone, or if you're interacting as a person, they're going to have problems that you might be able to solve or bring value to their life, right? And it kind of circumvents, like, I need this thing in my life solved, so I'm going to like help someone else solve their thing. Doesn't technically always directly solve your problem. However,
I'm glad for this.
However, there is magic in adding value and solving other people's problems, because that is when your problems can also get solved in a circuitous way, I guess.
I like,
right? Does that happen?
I'm a firm believer in that. I mean, I'm
great.
not
I just want to
like
make sure I wasn't like.
No, I think that's right. I'm not a religious person. I don't even know that consider myself a spiritual person, but I do believe that, and there's probably math behind this or something, but when you are putting things out there, when you are coming in to help, to be a helper, if that's the frame through which you're hearing this, how can I help? How can I assist? People will meet you in the same way. People will come to you in the same way. You'll attract that.
Yeah,
I really do believe that. If you're shut off to that, if you're all about you, then you'll just attract other people that are all about them.
100%. Like,
so,
I think this podcast is an example of that, because our original like problem was, we need to figure out how to pitch our stories better. We write stories that we both think are great, but when we talk about them, people's eyes glaze over, and that's a problem to solve in a town where you can pitch something and then it can change your life, right? Yep. So we have set out to include our other filmmakers and anyone who wants to listen in the process of us learning how to pitch, how to better contextualize and speak about our stories. And as a result, I have learned more from sitting down with people like yourself and the other guests we've had and doing research for the podcast and sharing that than I had ever been able to come to on my own conclusions about pitching. So yeah, it's like this is the change in the world we wanted to see. We're helping other people and then also benefiting from it.
I also think there's like creative ways that other people can be beneficial to their peers. Like when I emailed all of those casting directors, so I direct things. I emailed a bunch of casting directors. Hey, I've worked with this actor. on multiple projects. They're talented. Their craft is on point. They show up on time. High recommend. And I heard back from these casting directors. They're like, we've never had a director do this ever. I was like, why not? That's some little part of the power that I have that I can use to lift other people up.
Well, it's because you're also coming from a place of abundance. That's a place of feeling that the world actually has enough for us all. And it's not the zero-sum game, Hunger Games, that I think capitalism puts us in the mindset of I must hoard and be secretive and keep whatever I can. I gotta get mine. I actually think that all that does is actually like it impoverishes even the people that have it. It impoverishes their soul. Like it is not it is not the human way of being, but the idea of saying, let me help. We're helpers. What's that? There's that Fred Rogers quote about anytime something tragic happens, look for the helpers. Because that's the hope, and that's actually who we are. I've so firmly believed that. And that, again, it's not transactional.
No.
You're not all of a sudden going to have, like, because you did that, someone's not going to say, like, oh, you should now hire this writer. But it's not about that. And if it's not about that, I do believe, though, that you will surround yourself and be in a community of people where if you're taking care of each other and you're helping each other, the tide will lift all boats.
Yeah.
I think that there's a fallacy in this industry that you only have so many favors. Right? Like I have talked to multiple people in this industry who are like, no, I can't ask that person.
Sure.
Like, because I can only ask them one thing.
That's like a self-perpetuating fallacy.
It is.
Because the people, they're afraid of asking for more favors. If they burn a favor from that person is like, I only have so many favors to give. So if you burn one of yours with me, I'm not going to give you another favor. Because why? Their time is so precious.
Right.
Like some of these people are very busy and very important, but
Yeah.
I like to say no one's out here saving lives. No one's actually like performing triple bypass. Like no one in this industry is actually hands-on performing surgery to save someone's life acutely. Like stories are one of the most important things in the world. I will stand by that statement. I'll fight anybody who disagrees, but also at the same time, we're not like rescuing people from collapsed buildings.
Yeah.
Like no one's time is so precious that they can't give another favor.
No,
That's right. And it's also if you believe it, right? Like you can give that and you can help if like you believe it. Like I don't think you can just go around and be like, I'm going to make a connection for every person I know to every other person I know.
Right.
Sure, yeah.
It has to be being like, no, this is special. Like I'm bringing this to you because like, if I were in your shoes, I'd be buying this. This is an unbelievable story. It's exactly that's what happened when you reach out to the casting directors. If you were a casting director, you'd be like, I would cast this actor in every single thing I do. Yeah. They're professional. They're talented. It's because you believe it. It's a lot easier to sell and make connections for the thing that you believe. It can't be a sort of quid pro quo. It can't be transactional.
No.
It has to be genuine and authentic. And then I believe that if what you're doing is genuine and authentic, there is no end to the number of favors people will do for you because they will trust your judgment. They'll trust your taste, right? They'll know that you're not just, this is someone that I went to grade school with or someone I'm doing a favor for. You're doing it because you actually want to elevate the idea. You want to elevate this artist. I think.
And I like favors that it's not for me. I'm asking for someone else. Those are my favorite favors to ask.
So like a selfless favor.
Well, yeah. Because I don't know.
But what do you get out of that?
I get to help you.
Yeah, or it's not even a favor because again, it's an answer. This is an answer to something you need. So I'm actually, the favor I'm doing is to you, not the person I'm introducing you to.
So for our audience of writers or agents or whomever, like if somebody wants notes from you, but you know that they're writing a thing, offer to give them notes. Don't wait for them to ask.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard for people to ask for things or they don't know how to ask because that's not part of their toolbox.
Yep.
Yeah. Or introduce them to this podcast and tell them to get better in a sly kind of way.
I have a question.
Please.
In addition to having a family and running this this organization, what else do you do? What are your like
Oh, good
hobbies,
question.
interests outside of this, or does that take up all your time? Because
No, I have. I mean, I'm so boring. I'm a big fan of the New York Yankees.
okay,
So I listen to almost every game. I love radio too, and I love the radio broadcast. So I listen to almost every baseball game.
Okay.
Some part during the season, while either I'm in the car or I get home, and it's the beauty of being on the West Coast that I'll never fall asleep during a game unless
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
on the West Coast, because the games are all done by 7, which is great. I read a lot, not as much as I used to read, but reading is a big, thing for me. So I enjoy reading, and I get the New York Times every Sunday and read the New York Times. Those are things that like for me, but I'm very dull. I don't have some like sophisticated interests or anything. I mean, so much of my energy is in my children. I think I'm present for them in a way. It's like the greatest privilege of my life is to have the flexibility to be at Little League with them and to spend
Yes.
time with them. I read out loud to my children every day.
I love
for a long period of time, and ever since they were babies, like that's a big thing for me. Like I read to my children, and they're also like voracious readers on their own. So that's a big story, and that's all stories, right?
Yeah.
It's all so that's very, and to share stories with them that I read or I had read to me when I was little, and that's important. But I mean, it really is. It's young storytellers and my family take up, with the little Yankees on the side.
I don't know about you, Leah,
my
but I wouldn't say that's boring.
I wouldn't either.
It
I
sounds
love
like
kids
you have
and reading.
lovely, valuable things in your life, and you like what you like, and
I'm very
fantastic.
content with like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I feel like those are the things that I want,
yeah,
and I'm fortunate enough to have them.
yeah.
You-
What a gift.
You're in South Pass, right?
Yes.
So I go there all the time for like everything that I do in my life, even though I live in downtown.
She's constantly in South Pasadena. I'm like, where are you? She's like, I'm in Pasadena. I'm coming back from Pasadena.
Yeah,
Everything is in
I am.
Pasadena for her.
But one of something fun that I've done with my niece who is in Ohio is I took her bouldering, and so they have a rock climbing gym in South Pasadena now on Fair Oaks and Hammond, across from where the fire department is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Touchstone climbing. It is a blast to take a kid there.
Oh, that's a
First
good
of all,
idea.
they're instinctually good at it because they have
Yes.
like no body weight.
Well, yeah, I have an 8-year-old who's like in the 3rd percentile for height and weight,
There you
and
go.
he is so quick and agile and
Yeah.
climbs on everything
There-
still. And
There you go.
he would love that. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, definitely check it out. They have shoes to rent there.
I'll just watch from the bottom.
You can just watch from the bottom.
Good move. Smart. Yes.
Otherwise, it's you'll have to do an addendum to this podcast, like a tragic update about what happened when I
We have an update about
I
Bill.
fell off of the
Per Leah's
boulder.
suggestion, he fell
We'll do a
his
bonus episode.
fractured 3
Called
vertebrae.
I know.
Injuries
He's now in
sustained.
traction, and the only thing he can do is podcast. So
Traction Podcast.
There you go.
So where may our listeners sign up to volunteer and learn more about Young Storytellers?
youngstorytellers.com, and then there's very prominent buttons that say volunteer and donate. Yes, we have programs in more than 40 schools here across Los Angeles, and I mean, you'll leave the process a better person.
Yeah. Are you international yet?
Well, we have a sister program in Brazil
Wow.
in Portuguese because we had a very talented volunteer who was here on a Fulbright scholarship from Brazil at AFI. Mm-hmm. And before his Fulbright ran out, we had coffee together, and he was like, I want to bring something of social impact back to Brazil. And he asked if he could run a pilot of Young Storytellers with a youth mentoring organization he had been in when he was in high school.
Wow.
And I said, great. I said, maybe don't call it Young Storytellers, call it something else, but you can totally take the bones of what we're doing and adapt it for the needs of the community. And it's now in 3 cities in Brazil running with this NGO. And they do all this other exciting things there that, we hadn't thought of here. Like they have volunteers pretend to be like Secret Service for the kids as they're walking down the red carpet, and they do all of this paparazzi stuff. We've even taken some ideas from them over the years. So it's been a really beautiful thing. And I think, again, this goes back to our toolkit model. I mean, our hope is to build a national and international community of young storytellers, program providers, where we'll just be a seat at the table and we can learn how all of these other communities across the globe were able to adapt our tool to meet their needs. And then we can integrate some of that here in Los Angeles too, and just sort of have that feedback.
I love that.
With one another in that dialogue. So yeah.
But
more to come, I hope.
Do you remember the name of that program in Brazil?
Well, I'm not going to say it in Portuguese because I'll get it wrong.
Okay.
But the name of it in English is Telling Dreams.
Nice.
Telling Dreams. Okay, so the Portuguese translation. We'll figure that out. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Now, I got one last thing. You've been doing this long enough to have seen, I'm assuming, some of your original mentees become adults. Mm-hmm. Do you stay in touch with any of them? What's the feedback?
Yeah, I mean,
what's the
I
relationship
think
like there with some of them?
sure. I mean, which I was sharing with you earlier before we started. I had lunch yesterday with one of our alums who is now actually a writer here in Los Angeles. Went to graduate school for playwriting, and just a very accomplished young artist. I think it's interesting. I think nonprofits have a really bad habit of trying to take credit for what people accomplish after they've encountered their programs. So, I'll start by saying that she and many of our alumni, all of our alumni, are just beautifully talented people who accomplish all of these things on their own. I think if you asked her, she would just say that she had one of those sort of exposure moments with us, an epiphany moment of oh, I can write something and a room can react. And that sparked something in her that then led her to look for more of that. And so then she went to other organizations as well that, the Young Playwrights Festival and Center Theater Group has the August Wilson monologue competition. She ended up at LACHSA, the LA County High School for the Arts. Wow. So she started to then, after that spark was lit, look, she was hungry. Where are more resources? What are other areas that I can develop myself? And now, she is this very talented person. I think that on some level, that's what we can hope for, is giving young people that spark. And it may not be the writer spark. It may just be, and for many of our students, this is what it is. I'm important enough. I have something meaningful enough to say, and adults will take that seriously. I have value. Mm-hmm. I have a voice. That, on just a fundamental level, you need that to accomplish anything, is that belief in yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's hard when I get that question, because it's very easy to go right to the writer. But most of the kids don't grow up to be writers. What we hope is they're growing up to be people that understand that, they have agency and power through telling their story and being themselves.
Yeah. What a gift.
Truly.
It is.
Yeah.
It's been the greatest, next to my children, the greatest gift in my life.
So go volunteer if you have the time. Or also, sometimes you do one-off because of your breakout rooms. You need somebody to sit in, right?
Well, we have these workshops called Day of Story workshops. So we do have those opportunities. But most of our volunteer opportunities are longer term, usually 9 weeks, 10 weeks, just because there is so much data that shows that an extended intervention is more impactful. There's a greater depth of impact than coming in just for one session.
Yeah,
because if you go back to my story, if I had just gone once, I would have never built the relationship that I was able to build with Jackie, where she felt safe enough to create the story, to tell the story that was inside of her.
Right.
That came from trust, and trust comes from time. And there's not really a shortcut to that.
It's like the Waldorf model for education.
Yeah.
The longer you're with the students. Yeah.
The boss who initially told you to go over there, did you thank him?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, what's amazing is so then I did that, and then, he actually helped me get the job, because I ended up quitting working for him. And I thought I was just going to be quitting my job, but I said, do you think I could go help produce Young Storytellers rather than this TV show? And he could have thrown me out of my ear especially in 2006, because that's how the industry worked then.
Yeah.
But instead, he picked up the phone and called the woman who was running it, and a week later, I was working there.
That's great.
And that was also a gift. To that, that he, when I came to him with a genuine expression of a direction I wanted to go, that he didn't take that as like an insult to his business or an affront to his ego, that he heard me and met me in that place and helped.
Yeah.
So it was
I think
a
that's
big moment.
That's important for anybody who wants to volunteer to know. Is like, I was working at a social justice documentary place a couple blocks away from the school where I volunteered, and I asked my boss, can I just take my lunch breaks every Friday and go do that? So I think that you'll find a welcoming ear for whoever you have to ask to take the time for that hour.
Yeah, I think that's...
I don't think that should prevent anybody. And if your boss says no, like, maybe that's not
maybe
the right
it's not
job.
the right job. No, it's true.
Yeah.
Especially in 2023.
Yeah. The things that we've learned about ourselves and what worth is, and where our time is better spent.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's been lovely. It's a real treat. I'm tickled every time we have someone like yourself come in and sit and share their story with me. I'm just like, this is the coolest thing we're doing right here. As much as I like want to write my stories and tell my stories, this has been such a worthwhile endeavor for me, because I get to connect with people like yourself and hear their stories, and it expands my understanding about storytelling in this world. It really does. So thanks for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for letting me talk about my favorite subject.
Yeah, you're
which
welcome.
is young storytellers.
You're good at it. You're good at it. So.
Thank you very much. So, cheers from Hollywood.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Cheers from Hollywood.
We'd like to extend a special thank you to Bill Thompson from Young Storytellers. Thanks for coming on. And make sure to check out Young Storytellers online to find out how you can volunteer at www.youngstorytellers.com.
If you're on the fence about subscribing, know that a portion of all subscription fees go toward the nonprofit Young Storytellers, raising voices one story at a time.